Perfect.
Okay, great. Can everyone see me? Because I see Cleo. Just want to make sure everyone can see me. I mean, yes?
Yes.
So as a warm up before we get started, I just want to say that I'm coming from the beautiful traditional territory of the Haida Nation, and I'm here in Skidegate. What you see on the screen in front of you is the Kyle Nagai Heritage Center, the Haida Heritage Center, which I also look after as part of my job, in one of our beautiful 50-foot Bill Reed Lutas canoe there. But just to get everyone warmed up, can you put in the chat box what traditional territory you're coming from? Okay, let's see here. I'm seeing Takla Nation, Songhees, Swalatu, Swan Lake. Ooh, lots of names I can't pronounce. Micmaci. This is fantastic. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone. Thank you. Unceded territory. Great. And how many people do we have in our session today? Do you know, Cleo? So another warm up is if you go down to the bottom of the screen, there's a participants number there. It says 25. If you click on that, you have an opportunity to raise your hand, which we can do at the end of the session when we're doing some question and answers, as well as there's a few more icons there for a thumbs up. There's a clapping icon there. So if you want to be a little bit more interactive, you can do that. Okay. So welcome to Streamlining Planning. Let's go to the next slide. And thank you so much, Cleo, for being my number one and controlling the slides. Okay, so today we're going to do a brief introduction about who I am. I'd like to know what your experience is. I know Jesse had talked about that earlier today. So whether you're in phase 1, 2, 3, or 4 with your planning, what you hope to learn about this session. We're going to talk about different types of plans, how they all fit together, how to keep the momentum going, how to keep that communication with the plan between organizations and departments. And then I'd like to end the session with a question and answer period. So throughout the session, I'd like us to use the chat box. There'll be several questions asked throughout the session. People can put their answers in the chat box. And then at the end of the session, with the time, if time allows us to, I'd like to open the floor to people to use their mics and actually have some conversations. I am a facilitator, and so for me, doing this type of presentation really helps if I have the interaction. And the same way it goes with CCP, that you have so much knowledge in your community. We have a lot of knowledge in this session, and if we have the opportunity to share knowledge amongst each other, I think we should take that opportunity. So my first question, if we can go to the chat box, is what is your experience? So if you could just quickly pop in the chat box, if you're in phase 1, if you're in phase 2, if you're in phase 3 or phase 4, or maybe you've finished your CCP, or maybe, yeah, if you're just in the beginning, so we can get an idea. Great practicum student. Lots of people in phase 1. Okay, so in Skidegate here, phase 3, phase 1. Okay, some people have not even started their CCPs. That's totally normal too, getting into the intro and figuring out what CCP is. Draft CCP basically done. That's probably, it could be phase 1, it could be phase 4. I took us 5 years to finish our CCP. Phase 3. Okay, great. Yeah, it doesn't really matter what phase you're in, because like Jesse had said with that diagram, it's an ongoing. Once you finish your CCP, you're usually ready to start up again and start it all over. Okay, not even close to passing it, and implementation. Yeah. I found that by the time we finished our CCP, we had already implemented a ton of the projects. They were already done, so that you can really see that success when you're working on it. Okay, my next question is, what do you hope to learn in this session? What is one thing you'd like to learn? Okay. I don't see anything in the chat box at this point. Oh, here we go. Community engagement in COVID. Oh, this is definitely something I want to talk about. We're going to see this in one of the slides. How to mix meld different plans. Okay. Creating a legacy plan with my community, working closely with our CCP coordinator. Okay. I'd like to learn more, Kara, about what a legacy plan is. How to engage community during COVID. I think we should open up that conversation to the group at the end. A legacy plan, it sounds like a long plan, like a time that's for many, many years. Yeah. How to prevent committee burnout. Definitely. Okay. We can do some Q&A maybe at the end about that, because I can tell you what we did in our community. Implementation and accountability to the plan. Okay. Implementation. Okay, I do have some really good tools I will share with you, and I'll drop those into the Slack for you at the end of the session. Okay. All right, so let's get started. Oh, sorry. Cleo, you're in charge of the slides. Okay, a little bit about myself. So, Ewins Hanudukigaga. Ewins is my Haida name. It means one of plenty. And I'm assuming from my life experience so far, it means one of plenty of children, because I have 4 children, 3 teenagers and 1 still in elementary school. I belong to the Choth Eagle clan of Kailanis, which is the picture that you saw on the screen earlier. That's the village that I come from. I'm of both Haida and Musqueam descent, so I have the best of both worlds. I've been passionate about economic development and Indigenous planning. I also was privileged enough to work on the movie Edge of the Knife, which we showed this at one of the past CCP workshops. But this movie was done entirely in the Haida language, and it came from community planning. Our community wanted to protect our land and waters so we could showcase the beauty of Haida Gwaii, and we wanted to revitalize our language. We have only a handful of fluent speakers that are left, and our goal was to create 1 fluent speaker. And so we had a whole cast of people learning to speak Haida in both Hutkil and Haida Kill, both the northern dialects. We had people from Alaska come and help us out. We had elders come up from Seattle. It was just an amazing experience. For the last 4 or 5 years now, I've been working as a mentor with the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Mentorship Initiative. I started out as a mentee. So Jesse Heppel was my mentor. And I also had Sandra Harris as one of my mentors. And then I started becoming a mentor myself. I've traveled all across Canada. I've worked in communities in Northern Ontario with communities in Saskatchewan and Manitoba and all across BC. And if you haven't heard about the mentorship program, you should check it out because it's great. It's nation to nation mentoring. It's a free service. It costs your community nothing. And there's a lot of mentors out there with a lot of free resources and knowledge that they'd like to share. Let's see. I have a diverse range of planning experience from working on the comprehensive community plan for Skidegate. I did that for 5 years. We also did a land use plan and a Haida language revitalization plan. I've done a lot of project-based planning. I now work for an economic development corporation called Gwalganai. So I've done 5-year strategic plans. And I also started off running a kids culture camp, and doing that, I learned about the value of culture, youth, elders, and proposal writing. So I love sharing that type of information as well. And I also like to incorporate traditional protocol and language throughout everything that I do. And the next slide. So first of all, if we start at the basics, what does comprehensive community planning look like today? So if we could go into the chat box. Some people mentioned community engagement during COVID-19. I think this is going to be probably one of our biggest challenges. The last presenter from, was it SPUSM? I think it would be great to go on her website and check out the type of tools and resources that they've created for community engagement. And I think we could have a whole session on community engagement during COVID. But in the chat box, any ideas of what comprehensive community planning looks like today? I know when I first started doing, oh, here we have one here. Oh, okay, no. Virtual, yes. So I know one of the challenges with virtual is that a lot of elders don't have experience with technology, or may not even have access to internet or the computers or iPads. So that can be a challenge of how to engage elders and work with elders during COVID. And plus, those are the people we want to keep safe. I know when I first started doing community planning, there were a lot of people in the community that were nervous about community meetings. Like the attendance was very, very low. If you had a public meeting, nobody would come. And they distrusted consultants. They distrusted sometimes even the band council. So doing meetings in small groups, family meetings, is a great way to do comprehensive community planning right now. You know, you could bring one person into a home and have all of their family be there. Printable packages, I see this in the chat here, offered in the mail, that ones that could do the virtual options. Yep, that's a great idea. Utilizing other existing services who are still in contact with families, youth, parents, and families. Yeah, that's great. I know we have some health people that go door to door with prescriptions or drop off healthy food boxes. Yes, first line services. That's a great idea. Okay, so I'll just move on to the next bullet. So comprehensive community planning, today it builds on strengths from resilient past. We've all had negative experiences in our community. We've had trauma in our community, and we've pulled through and become stronger and better communities because of it. So we're building on the strengths that exist currently in our communities. That's what it looks like. The next bullet. Ways to maintain and strengthen community resilience. So how do we continue to maintain and strengthen community? I know getting together is how we keep up communication and how we keep up our relationships. So how do we find new and innovative ways to maintain our community resilience? And I see in the chat here, someone had also said, they've had 2 community engagement sessions via Zoom, and some of the elders have learned Zoom and others have joined with family members. Now we've done that too. We've had people go to their homes, help them with the technology, and get them set up so they can participate. Okay, the next bullet. Coming together to plan for uncertain futures and impacts of climate change. So uncertain future, that's definitely happening right now with COVID and the pandemic. Also, for us, I mentioned The Edge of the Knife. We made that movie because we wanted to protect our land and waters from Enbridge and the oil and gas industry. We wanted our way of life to stay the way it is with our pristine waters and being able to eat from the beach. So that's one thing that we worked on. Also, we had an earthquake on Haida Gwaii, and it shook everyone because it was a huge earthquake and we weren't prepared for it. And we realized that we didn't have tsunami sirens. We didn't have food storage. We didn't have water. We didn't have plans for our elders. We didn't have kits at home. And I don't know if you noticed this, but we just had a big earthquake in Alaska, 7.5 on Monday. And I went running for my kids, and we put our emergency plan into action and got our elders and went up the hill. So yeah, emergency planning for uncertain futures. The next bullet. Focusing on community health pandemic. I know when you're doing community planning, it doesn't matter what your plan is with your community plan. If something happens in your community, everybody stops and everybody focuses on what's happening. In the past, this happened in communities with forest fires. It's happened in communities with flooding. It's happened, and there's so many ways that communities have come together and used the CCP to put it to use where it benefits their community, focus on the crisis at hand. So right now we're all focusing on community health. Also, I wanted to mention, well, new ways of how we work together and look after each other, yes. But I also wanted to mention that when it comes to CCP, we asked our elders, what is our priority? What comes first in our CCP? What do we focus on? How does it get laid out in our document? And they said, number one, you need your language and your culture, because if you don't have your language and culture, how do you know who you are? And number two is health. If you don't have your health and wellness, your community isn't going to be around, right? Your health, you won't have anything. So focusing on health is definitely a priority. The next bullet. So what are going to be the results from these challenges? So we're dealing with a big issue with COVID and continuing our CCP and continuing to build and improve our communities and to come together with a shared voice. So what are the results going to be from these challenges? Does anyone want to put some suggestions out there in the chat box? Excellent way to communicate with connect with your community, great best practices. Celebrate even the little accomplishments of CCP. Celebration is key. Other great things are happening. Keep the spirits up and positive enforcement. Develop new and normal ways to experiment with new techniques. Yeah. I think also like social isolation is a big thing. Like you may be healthy, but if you're socially isolated, it can be very depressing for people. There can be many mental health issues and other challenges. So I think we're improving lines of communication. I think is definitely going to be a result. And can we go to the next bullet? Developing a new normal and try to experiment with new technologies. This is definitely a way of sort of not really forcing, but, you know, passing on these skills to elders and people that may not have had access, and also focusing on access to technology, access to internet. I think that's key for our communities. So we're going to have new stories of collaboration. Definitely. That's what we're talking about. New practices of care. How do we look after each other? The next bullet. New ways of building relationships, new ways of land-based connection. Oh, there's a few more best practices noted. Okay. Utilizing other existing services. We did mention that. Okay. Right, and new ways of engagement. We're gonna have so many amazing stories about things that work really well in people's communities, and we need to share those stories. Okay, the next slide, please. So again, back to basics. What is a comprehensive community plan? So if we understand what a comprehensive community plan is, then we can identify how it's different from other plans. So in the chat box, what is a comprehensive community plan? Well, if we break it down, a comprehensive community plan, comprehensive means it's encompassing everything. When we were doing our CCP, the past plan, which was a comprehensive community development plan, it was done by consultants, and it consisted of three things. It existed of capital, health, and education, and that was it. Ooh, here we go. A plan rooted in visions, hopes, and dreams of all members. That's a great one. A roadmap forward of wants and needs of a community. A plan for everything, identify needs and wants for community, and action to carry it all out. Yeah, those are great summaries of what a comprehensive community plan is. Finding out who we are today and why. Yeah. There's an amazing video that I watched. It was recorded back in the 80s. It's called La Plan de Vida. It's a community that started doing comprehensive community planning in Colombia. And they had lost their culture. They'd lost their their songs, their language, their land, and they came together as a community, learned about their past and who they were and their language and their song and their regalia, and they took it all back. So if you ever get a chance to watch it, it's called La Plan de Vida. It's on YouTube. Okay, next bullet. A community plan is created by community and organized around a shared vision and goals for community's future. We just said that. Economic development plan that will pay for cultural programs, sports. Okay. A community plan is created through a process. That's really important, is that coming together to talk, which is exactly what our CCP is called in Haida, coming together to talk. It's a process. And once you start that process in your community, it can be used for everything. It could be used for your ECDEV plans. It could be used for other community engagement. We've done it for workshops on water conservation, and we've done it for workshops on energy consumption. The next bullet. A community plan is ongoing. That's right. It doesn't end. Like a budgeting plan that maybe lasts, for a year, or a economic strategic plan might last for 5 years, but a community plan is ongoing. Okay, the next bullet. A community plan is a tool. So this is something that doesn't just get put on a shelf. It's something that everybody feels that they're part of it and that they can use it. Different programs or departments can pull a page from the CCP and say, okay, this page is specific to the work that I'm doing, and I'm going to build on this page. Okay, someone wrote in here, CCP is a time to come together and unite our members on a new, exciting journey. It's also a resource that will reflect where change needs to happen. Yeah, I think that's great. We did a CCP video for our community, and in there, the elders said, I felt like it was the first time I've actually had a voice and I had a say in what's happening. And I think that's very true. So the last one is that the community plan is a commitment. It's a commitment by the community for the community. Yes, I will put all of the links to this information in Slack after this. Okay, we've got someone else putting here, adapting to new challenges such as COVID, being resilient. We are the changers and movers. Kim, you're definitely very inspirational. Okay, and then here there's a little graphic of what CCP looks like. Oh, how often, once official, do folks revise their community plan? Annually, every 5 years. So if you look at the CCP diagram, you should be looking at your CCP annually, celebrating those successes, and make a point of going through the CCP. Our chief and council would do this at public meetings, is that they would go through and highlight all of the things that were completed out of the CCP for that year and celebrate it. Your plan could be revised every 5 years or every 6 years. Sometimes people do it every 10 years. It's up to your community, and to figure out, how fast your community is changing. Maybe your CCP isn't working. Maybe the whole thing needs to be redone. It's not out of place. I don't think that's a silly question at all. I know people have started their CCPs several times and had to start at square one again because it wasn't the right time for their community to do their CCP. Okay, the next slide. Okay, what types of plans exist in your community right now? What types of plans have you seen in your community? So if you can go to the chat box, which session is this? This is Streamlining Planning. Streamlining Planning. We're talking about what CCP is, and now we're moving into other plans. So what types of plans exist in your community? Draft emergency plans, land use, departmental strategic plans, health plans, dev plans, heritage policy. That's a good one. Okay, any other plans that exist in your community? Is there anyone working on language revitalization plan? Draft format bylaws. Yeah, I don't think plans have to be finalized. I think as long as you're working on them, it's the process that's important. I think the CCP process, it doesn't really matter about the document, but having usable tools that your community can use is important. Post land code. Yeah, a lot of people are working on land code. Language is in our CCP, but we don't have something separate. Yeah, we actually started our CCP after 2 years, we started working on a Haida language plan, Haida language revitalization plan. And then we also started working on our land use plan at the same time. Capital asset plans, yeah. Okay, so if we go to the next bullet, housing plans. We ended up putting together a housing plan during our CCP as we were doing the research so that people would have a snapshot of what exists in our community and what's happened in the past. Next bullet. Again, I work for Skidegut's Economic Development Corporation. So this is our 5-year economic development plan. Next one. You might come across project plans, feasibility studies. You might come across the next bullet. Business plans. I mentioned Haida language revitalization or language revitalization plan. Edge of the knife. This is a poster from when we held this at SCARP, a presentation. This came from our CCP to focus on language. It also focused on economic development, on green economy. You know, what new businesses can we be doing in our community that are not focused on fishing or fisheries, commercial fishing or forestry. So it's a green industry. So that's another example. Next bullet. You might have a health plan in your community or a capital plan. I've got schooling and culture. Other plans in our community, we have a land use plan, the Haida Gwaii Marine Plan, but also Gwaii-Haunas, which is a National Park Reserve and Haida Heritage Site. They just put together, in partnership with the Council of the Haida Nation, a land, sea, people plan. So in the past, we've talked about, you know, planning from ocean floor to our land, to our people, to now we're talking about to the air and to the stars above us. Like as Indigenous people, all of that is comprehensive in our community. Someone also put in here implementation of a culture camp out on our traditional territory, feasibility study. That's great, Michelle. Financial management plan. Okay. Next slide. So this is one of the steps in your CCP when you're doing your phase 1. We had to do the research of what past plans existed in our community because you don't want to replicate the work that's already been done. You can pull really good information from the past work. So we did a planning inventory. Then in your CCP, you do the work and you collect more data and information and do the engagement. And then finally, when you're finished your CCP and you start going towards your action plan and implementation, you want to be able to pass this information on for other plans, whether it's a language revitalization plan, whether it's a health plan, whether it's a capital plan, a land use plan, ACDEV plan, cultural plan, energy plan. When we go through some of these items here, I see a lot of progress that's moved from one plan to another. Okay, the next slide. So this is Skidegut's comprehensive community plan. It's called Gut-is, which means coming together to talk. It also says Kunisi ang yakudang, which means honoring our past, or respecting our elder, or respecting our, Kunisi means ancestors. So respecting our ancestors. Gunkasta tulgith, shaping our future. And the next slide. So I did mention that we worked on our land use plan while working on our CCP, and we felt that this was so integrated that it needed to be in one plan. So our directions overlapped with our comprehensive community plan or our land use plan. Our CCP is talking about how we live, it encompasses everything we do about how we live our day-to-day lives. And the land use plan incorporates how we use our land or how we're connected to our land. So you can see empowering our youth, that could connect to all of the ones on the bottom with the land use plan. However, protecting our land and waters overlaps, that which makes us Haida overlaps. Fostering community pride and equality connects to nurturing community connections. Increasing community resilience, strengthening community resilience, and that might encompass you know, environmental plans, safety plans, emergency preparedness plans. Enhancing good governance, overlaps. Establishing a vibrant local economy overlaps with building a vibrant local economy. Promoting health and wellness connects to sustaining our natural food, our traditional medicines, our natural resources. And then lastly is promoting sustainable housing and infrastructure. I have a note here from Sherry that says, with all the community input requests for your various plans, how do you address community fatigue re-engagement? Yeah, a lot of people don't want to participate because it seems like it's the same thing happening over and over again. So you need to involve people that are passionate about the project and figure out what engages your community, what will your community get out of participating. And sometimes it has to be activities. It has to be fun cultural activities. It has to be good food. It has to be fun prizes. How do you address the plan authorities with other layers of authority? How do you address plan authorities with other layers of authority? I think I'll have to get into that a little bit later because I think I need more specific information from you to answer that question. Treaty strategic plans. Okay, move on to the next slide. So this is another look at how Gutgais and our land use plan was laid out. So on one side of the page, we have our, if you look at the very bottom, is our directions on both sides. And then we have our pathways, ways that we're going to go about implementing that. And then finally, the ultimate action that's going to happen. And these actions would be put into your implementation or your action plan. So if I look at one of these examples, like protect our land and waters, we want to reduce litter and so and pollution. And so the way that we're going to do that is we're going to, oh, it doesn't say that there. Okay, let's see. We want traditional land use. Utilize valuable knowledge of elders. Okay, so protecting our land and waters, we want to utilize valuable knowledge of our elders. So an action is we're going to teach local food gathering, catching, and preserving. And this is interesting because we're actually focusing on this now at our Haida Heritage Center. We're trying to figure out ways that we can have outdoor exhibits, have the community use those outdoor exhibits during COVID-19. So we're going to build fish drying racks, and we're going to build community smokehouses and community smoke pits so the community can still get together outside and practice our culture. Now move on to the next slide. Okay, so again, this is spread out. So if you look on one side, we have promoting our health and wellness with our CCP, and the other side is sustaining food, medicine, and natural resources. So I just wanted to give you an example of the layout of how the land use plan and a CCP can work together. In the pages here, we're identifying our current challenges and the snapshot of what things look like today. We have a quote here of, we embrace the strengths of our Haida people and practice holistic models of health care that encompasses all aspects of being, body, minds, and spirits. So this is taken from our health plan. So that was incorporated into our CCP, and also very relevant for today's day and age with COVID. And then we've laid out our pathways, actions, and indicators. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so in Jessie's presentation, she showed us this planning wheel that is in the CCP handbook. So how does all of this planning fit together? Now, looking at this CCP wheel, can you tell me what's a little bit different about it? Someone in the chat box. What is different about this planning wheel? It's color coded. Yeah, there's a little bit of color in there. I like color. That's why I picked this one. Justice. Yes, Michelle, it's justice. And I find this really interesting. So when we were working on our CCP, I mentioned our last plan only had three sections in the wheel. And we realized that we were missing spirituality. Like, it was really important to our community to have spirituality in there because of what happened with residential schools and the missionaries and all of that, and the different ways that people practice spirituality. So that was not in our CCP. Also, language. Our HIDA language was nowhere in any of our planning documents. So now language is incorporated into our CCP. And this one has justice. And our people are looking at challenges in our community like drugs and alcohol, and dealing with drug dealers, and how things used to be done in the past with justice. So we would ship people off to another island if they were there were issues in our community. They would be shipped off to an island, and they'd be forced to, be on their own for weeks at a time, so that they could think about what they had done, and then they would have to come back and make it right with a family, which is a Haida law till yatta. So I think justice is a really important piece that's in here. Also, I think traditional law is an interesting piece as well, which we'll get into a little bit later. So yeah, next slide. Fitting this all together. So this is an example from Kitsim-Kalem, one of the communities I've worked with in the past. And this is in their plan. So CCP, it's created by the community. It's high level. It can exist for years and years and years and years. And that's connected to the council's strategic plan. This is done, well, it says every 5 year, a 5-year vision. However, our council only is in term for 2 years. So it can be a plan that exists for a couple years for them. And also with our council, the reason they supported the CCP was so that they could have a snapshot of what the community wanted in their back pocket. So when they went to meetings, off island or in Vancouver or funders, they could pull out this document and say, okay, this is what our community is working on right now, and this is what we need funding for. And this is what's supported by our community. Okay, and then that can be broken down into departmental strategic plans. So each department, your housing, your education, social development, economic development, they can pull the parts of the CCP that are pertinent to them into their work. Also, you might have high level priorities as well as inclusion of elders, or inclusion of youth, or use of language. So those policies could be pulled into their everyday work as well. And then it could be pulled down further into like individual work plans. So this is just an example of how CCP might work with the band council, or with your treaty organizations, or with your health centers, and then finally into your individual work plans. Okay, next slide. Okay, I realize this slide is a little bit blurry, but it kind of gives you an idea about how the CCP can be sandwiched between other plans and how they work together. So the comprehensive community plan itself, it can be endorsed by the community, whether it's through, whether it's passed into law, or whether it's signed off by the community. And then that can further enforce legal bylaws or laws. And then finally, that can move down into constitution. It could be signed as a constitution, or into treaty or self-government agreement. And then above that would be your other plans, like your land use plan, or your land code, or which is also legal, or into your language plan, your health plan, and then again up to the different departments, and then up further into your individual work plans. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is more of an example of a municipal type plan, but how the comprehensive plan would work towards land use, for housing. I know with a lot of CCPs, they've done housing audits. They've looked at, what type of fuel source do you have in your home? Like, how are you heating your home? How many people live in your home? How many bedrooms do you have? Because that can reflect a lot of things about your community and your health and wellness. Also, Jesse mentioned in the last meeting about transportation. So I noticed in BC, transportation plans are not really a big deal. It's really taken care of by the province or different communities. However, back east, working in Ontario, they have a huge distance between even houses, and even a larger distance between communities. So, having road access or affordable transportation, because taking a flight is ridiculously expensive there. So that's a main priority for them back east. Utilities, hydro is one of our most expensive bills that we pay, especially when you live in the north. So having high hydro bills, having a utilities plan is very important. Energy consumption is very important. Capital facilities, so that's a key plan to have as well with your infrastructure. I've heard of different bands that have started doing a comprehensive community plan for a reserve that there is nothing on. There are no houses, there's no infrastructure, and they've had to build their community using their comprehensive community planning process. Economic development, so we talked about that as well. Okay, the next slide. Okay, here is just another example of how the community vision with the community values goes into the CCP, and then you create your principles and your objectives and your goals, and how that works with governance, with chief and council and administration. And then as well, it helps develop strategic plans and economic development. And then that goes further into supporting social development plans, sustainability plans, transportation plans, and infrastructure plans. So again, just another snapshot. Next slide. Okay, so this is an example of an action plan. Usla ista is what we say in Haida, and it means just do it. And this is a document, a planning template that I will put into Slack for you. So you can go ahead and pull that out and use it for your community. So on the left-hand side, we have an action. So the action is build assisted living on the waterfront. So we built an elders complex in our village, up in a new subdivision, up in the heights, and our elders hated it. Absolutely hated it. And before we knew it, there were next to no elders even living in there. And we found out it was because they couldn't see the water. Our people live by the weather. When we greet each other, we say "Kasingudang kaiding," and it means how is the weather today? We don't say hello, how are you? We say "Kasingudang kaiding," how is the weather today? So our elders need to be able to see the water and the weather. Then the next one is directions that action fulfills. So we're going to increase community resilience. We're going to promote. So these are all of our directions in our CCP. The task is to make a plan. The band council is going to be responsible. We're going to get this done within 2 years. Our benefits is that the elders have indicated they would like assist living on the waterfront. They're going to be happier. They're going to have increased accessibility. They're going to be closer to everything else. Key indicators, the amount of visits, the amount of elders. And then we've got a checklist into if it's been initiated, if the work plan's been created, if there's a budget, if it's been implemented. One of those action items might be whether the community has been consulted about it as well. So just so you know, our community has a beautiful health center that's being built right now. It's I think an $8 million center with an assisted living facility next to it. So it's actually happening. So the beauty of this type of plan is that this can be used for all departments. Each department can talk about what project they're working on that's in the CCP and the status of that, and people can meet monthly and get updated on each situation. Okay, next slide. Sorry. Okay, back to our chat box. How is Indigenous planning different than other types of planning? This is something that's taken me a lot to wrap my head around about how Indigenous planning is different. Because it's so different than any other type of planning. Any ideas about how Indigenous planning is different than other types of planning? Holistic rather than linear, yes. It encompasses everything. And in our language, we say, "Ginawadlahan gudak kwagat," which means everything is connected and everything depends on everything else. It comes from the heart of our people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it affects everybody. Any other ideas about how Indigenous planning is different? Okay, I'll move on to the first bullet. Non-linear. So yes, you guys said that already. Den said that. So most plans, they're set for a year. You might look at your annual budget, how you're going to spend your money. Or what's going to happen. And then like a 5-year plan that might have strategic goals and action items that you're going to accomplish within those 5 years. However, Indigenous planning does not necessarily cover a particular time period. Our people are seasonal. We plan for the seasons, we plan for the immediate seasons, but we also plan for future generations. And I love thinking about community planning as having the knowledge of our ancestors behind us. We've got hundreds of thousands of years of knowledge behind us that we carry with us. We involve young people who are planning for their future. They're planning for, their 100 years and maybe their grandchildren's generations and generations above them. So, and we also have elders in our community that have had 100 years of experience plus the knowledge of their ancestors. So we're non-linear. And the next bullet is that planning for us doesn't involve a dollar value. We do not need to plan for money necessarily. We're planning for bigger items. We're planning for a way of life, an improved way of life. People get hung up on things like in this day and age of like honorarium for participating, or consultants being paid high wages to give us their templates. So we don't do that. When it comes to our people and our knowledge, it's usually about a conversation. Okay, in the next bullet. Oh, here we go. Tailored to each community, talking about the ecosystem, right? Our connection to the land is so important. Mother Nature. Independent strengthening. Yes, we need to get back to how we were independent and lived with the land. Indigenous planning, I mentioned this, it involves youth, elders, all community members. I usually play this game, which I call a minute to win it, but basically it's about how much knowledge exists in a room, in your community, based on like different perspectives from young people to elders, their wealth of knowledge for language. We many of us speak many different languages, and how much knowledge there is in just a language itself. Okay, the next bullet. Language. Most plans are not done using the Haida language or Haida, Indigenous languages. And I've worked with communities that have done their vision in their language. And when it comes time to translate the vision into English, it doesn't work. It has so much more power and meaning in the traditional language. So I think that's really important. Next bullet. Spirituality. A lot of planning doesn't involve spirituality. And when I think about spirituality, I also think about protocol. Like, how does your community operate? Do you do prayers at the beginning and at the end of your meetings? Do you acknowledge, the chiefs and the elders in your community? Is there food involved, and does the food come before the meeting or after the meeting? Because all communities are different, and food is part of a process for us, especially when we're having a public meeting or a public event. It's like being a witness and accepting the food is as a gift, as part of your as part of law anyway, of being a witness. Okay, the next bullet. Social well-being. Yeah, so most Indigenous planning is not about about gaining funding or money. It's more about the general social well-being of a community. How do we look after each other? How do we make sure that everyone's needs are being looked after? Okay, the next bullet. Political versus traditional. So this is a really, really difficult one that a lot of people come across when they're working on plans, is that we're in the middle of two worlds. We have our traditional world where we have our traditional clans and chiefs, and we have our hereditary leaders, and then we have our political leaders who are voted in or elected. And we're also dealing with our traditional laws versus, federal or provincial laws. And how do we go, it's very challenging. How do we navigate both those worlds? And it's different for every community. Also, most plans don't necessarily involve food, but in our communities, food is the #1 priority. And I just got a message saying we only have 5 minutes left. No, this is so sad. I'm running out of time here. Okay, I'm going to be really quick, and then we're going to move on to some Q&A. So for us, the number of people that show up to a meeting is 100% based on who's cooking the food and what food is being served. So food is definitely important. Next bullet. our planning quite often is oral. Not everybody has the ability to read and write, or is it a cultural way for them? Their way to communicate is oral through conversation. Next one. And seasonal. I know we don't do planning during the summer because we have so much food harvesting and things going on. We tend to plan when there's more time for family to sit around and eat together and have meals together. So that quite often happens in the fall, winter, and early spring. Okay, next bullet. Also, traditional laws. We found out through our community meetings, we were trying to write down like rules of how to operate during our meetings. And we found out that we actually have traditional laws that we should be living our lives by, and they'd never been written down for meetings before. So this is like, everything is connected. Ginawadlahan Gudak Kwaget, Yakudung, all acts must be done with respect. Also having permission. Do you have permission is a very important one. Reciprocity. Yeah, so those are just some examples. The next slide. So we actually put the guiding laws that we found through land use planning. Another one would be the tide waits for no one. Food is our medicine is another one. When the tide is out, the table is set is another one. So our guiding laws went into our plan. Next one. Yeah, so that's what I have for you. I really want to open this up to the floor for any questions that you might have that I could answer. And if I can't answer them, please feel free to put them in the Slack and I will answer them in the Slack. And if you could just go to the last slide for me. Hawa, that's how we say thank you. So Hawa, Haichka, thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Andrea. It's so difficult to not have that interaction. So I'd like to open up the floor now. If you wanted to raise your hand, we're going to get rid of the slides. And thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, so if you just want to raise your hand and then we can go from there and you can turn on your mic and ask the question. Now, is there a way to see everybody? Do I need to, oh, I've got Kim. Okay, Kim, do you want to unmute yourself?
Because we have so many other plans that are existing, you know, for the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever, when we're working on our CCP, how important is it to include at least a summary of what's already existing? Like how much, how little, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think doing your planning inventory is really important. So create a document with all of the plans that exist. It's also really important to go to each department head and organization and find out what plans they're working with or what plans that they have. It's always good to pull like little blurbs. You might have some really good engagement in those plans. You can use that, or you can use key points from those plans in your CCP. And then it also helps build that trust and that buy-in with those departments to move on to the next phase of the CCP and have them using the CCP. Okay, does anyone else have their hand up? So if you want to put your hand up, you can go down to the participant where you see the number of people at the bottom of the screen. And there's an option there to raise your hand, or you can raise your hand on the screen. We have 58 seconds, people. Oh, thank you, Jamie. It was great seeing you too. Yeah, again, if you would like to go to the Slack, I will put all of the slides in the Slack. You can ask some more questions there and I will answer them.
If there's no questions, we have like whatever 30 seconds. Do you want to do like an old-fashioned applause with our sound on for Dana?
Yeah, everyone join in. We've only got a few seconds left. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Good job, Dana.
Take care, everyone. Look after yourselves.